Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Michael Wendroff. He is a global marketing consultant, now an author. He just wrote a book, his debut novel, What Goes Around, and this has been published by Bloomsbury in the USA and UK in audio, ebook, and hardcover. And even foreign language rights have been sold in Italian, Japanese, and Hungarian. We'll talk about all this, about his journey, about his unique writing process, and about his, as I said, inspiring debut journey. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Michael. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we'll be talking about. We'll talk about how you have created this thriller writing as your second career success. We'll talk about all this. But before that, let's learn a bit about your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Well, I am a global marketing strategist. I have been to India actually a number of times on business. But I've always wanted to write a book, and the impetus for What Goes Around, my debut thriller novel, was actually something that my mother said to me the second I was born, or so I'm told. I was put on her chest. She looked deeply into my eyes and she said, "Oh, how nice to see you again." And it was that again part that always intrigued me. I always wanted to do something with that. And I was always, naturally a bit of a good writer. So I wanted to write something about that. And in fact, my mother was also an editor back in the day with New York City publishing houses. And I distinctly remember on weekends seeing her sitting cross-legged on her bed, manuscript pages strewn about her, a red pen in hand, marking up those manuscript pages with her editorial comments. And, by the time it came for me to write my novel and get my editor's comments, they weren't in a red pen, but those comments in the margins of my Word document were just as, what shall I say, just as instructive. But at least I was prepared for editor's comments based on the experience of my mother.
Absolutely, Michael. Absolutely. So to understand this better, a lot of people would want to understand in there, what did that mean? Oh, how nice to see you again part. What did it exactly mean?
Well, I think my mother believed that we had met in another lifetime. And, when I have this scar over my chest that looks like it could have been from a bullet or an arrow or what have you. So I was always intrigued. I don't know if I believe that or not, but I keep an open mind. And that's why, that did have a profound impact on me, always wondering. And it does come up in the end of my novel, in this what's been called an amazing and original twist ending. So that's where it plays into my thriller.
Absolutely. So generally people move from, in family, they have so many things. People are doctors, lawyers, and the children, they move into another direction. You also moved into, an MBA, then a global marketing consultant. Why did you want to become a writer? Did you ever feel some sort of emptiness that you did not become a novelist, a writer, or was it much more to do with your, fulfilling something that your mother was also doing? Help us understand those emotions within you while you were so successful in the other part of your career.
Well, I always did want to write a novel, but I had other publishing related experiences growing up because my mother remarried, and she married a literary agent. And a literary agent, as many people may know, is the key conduit, the key intermediary between an author and a publisher. Publishers will not look at manuscripts that just come in from authors. they need to know that it's been vetted and they deal with literary agents. So, and the agent she married was an agent to many best-selling mystery and thriller writers. So I grew up reading those type of books, which is why I'm sure I picked the genre I did of thriller. And, you know, some of his clients included Dean Koontz. Another one was Robert Ludlum, who many people may know from the Bourne Identity movies that had Matt Damon in them. And in fact, I stayed at Robert Ludlum's house, his winter home, which was in St. Thomas in the Caribbean, for a few days once on vacation. And, you know, he's a very, very nice guy, very generous person. And I remember waking up early one morning and tiptoeing up into his living room and seeing him on his couch with a yellow legal pad in hand and a number 2 pencil, scribbling away. And that's actually how he wrote his 450-page novels, by hand, which I couldn't believe. And I'm very happy when it finally came time for me to write my novel. I had a PC. I don't think I could have done that by hand. But so I grew up around books and authors. But you know, I decided to go to business school. I went to NYU, both undergraduate and then for my MBA, because you know I knew some authors make it and some don't. So I wanted to have a business career experience as well. And it was interesting because it was when I was writing my MBA thesis that I kind of married my new love of business, of marketing, and my existing love of books, which is because the title of my thesis was Marketing in the Publishing Industry. And there's a trade journal in the publishing industry that's called Publishers Weekly, and they got wind that I was writing this and interviewing people in the industry, and they actually excerpted my thesis in 3 issues of their magazine over 3 weeks, and they actually paid me for that. So I got paid to write my thesis. And this was the first time I ever got paid for writing. And I like that. I like that a lot. But the other thing I liked was actually when I was interviewing publishing executives, there was one executive, he was then, Michael Korda was then the editor-in-chief at Simon & Schuster, major New York City publishing house. And had my appointment for the interview of him. And I'm waiting and it's like way beyond time that I should have seen him. And then finally the door opens up and who walks out? But he introduces me to Truman Capote, you know, In Cold Blood, the original tremendous thriller novel. So it was quite the experience. So that is, and then it took, you know, I went into business, I went into marketing, I was in advertising, and then my own consulting firm. And it was actually, you know, many years had gone by and I hadn't written a book. And I was wondering, you know, am I ever going to write this novel I've always wanted to? And then the pandemic hit. And there was that point in time where, you know, you certainly couldn't go to the movies, you couldn't go to restaurants. You know, my town here in Florida, you couldn't even go to the beach or play tennis. So I had no more excuses. So I sat down and I wrote that novel.
Absolutely, wrote that novel, and this is what goes around. We'll come to this novel certainly, and we'll also talk about the Hungarian cover also. But before that, Michael, I want to understand, you know, what was it like growing amongst all these literary people in your household, you know, seeing your life? One is that you know them. One is about knowing your own worth as a writer. Many people can grow in households which are, you know, which are in one way or the other things, you know, either for, as I told about doctors or lawyers or anyone. But how do you evaluate yourself as a writer? Because that is your personal confidence. Rest everyone else is, you know, this comes out, only adds to your learning. How did you do that?
Well, I think, and to some degree, writing does have to come natural to you. And, maybe it was in the genes from my mother, who was an editor, maybe not. But, and then being around authors, you find out that the author community, I've learned even more since my novels come out, is a very friendly, very, very welcoming community. And while writing and being around authors, while that helps for sure, there is also a craft to writing. There are certain things you need to learn to become a real writer. And there's a lot of ways that would-be authors can do that. For example, there are online courses. I took a course with BBC Maestro from Lee Child, who's done all of those best-selling Jack Reacher books. And I took another course from Harlan Coben, another best-selling thriller writer. And, while the two authors didn't necessarily always agree, it's still, there's still a lot to learn. And it's good that they didn't agree on everything, because part of it's got to be what you put into the book yourself, no matter what your background is. And there's other ways to learn too. You could, when people write their first novel, editing is so important. And some people, they give it to their family as the first editor, and then that's fine. Other people have writing groups, and getting feedback from them is important too. But the other thing in terms of learning your craft is you can also join writers groups, and you can also go to conferences. For instance, I'm going to the Thriller Fest conference in New York City next month, where I'm going to be honored there as a debut author. And at those conferences, there's a lot of sessions also on the craft of writing, how to do dialogue, how to, set up certain scenes. So there's always a lot to learn. And so I would encourage anyone interested in becoming an author to look into those type of things and really practice and hone your craft, and then believe in yourself and don't give up.
Absolutely. But why a thriller? Why not something related to marketing, something else, an MBA? You did a lot of interviews around that got published earlier on. Help us about this part about writing.
Well, thriller, I think it's because, growing up in with the literary agent stepfather, who had authors who wrote thrillers and mysteries, I think I just would always read those, and I would try and, absorb what was it about those novels that was working. And it's a genre that I loved. And, while I liked business and marketing as a career, when it comes to writing, I wanted to write something that really captivated me. And, from experiencing all those type of books, I learned a number of things I put into the writing of what goes around. For example, I believe you have to write in short chapters, because I think that propels the story forward. I think the consumer, the reader, really likes to feel they're making progress, and the short chapters help them feel like it's a quick read. And I also like to end each chapter of my novel with a real making the consumer beg for more. So it could be a cliffhanger that could be an actual physical cliffhanger at the end of the chapter, or it could be an emotional cliffhanger or a psychological cliffhanger. And then I like to start my next chapter with a very intriguing first sentence, so that the reader wants to keep going on. And then I'll usually have two different storylines going on. I've learned from, reading the better writers that also makes it interesting. So I'll end on a cliffhanger on one storyline, and the next chapter, I don't immediately resolve that, but I'll go into a secondary subplot to keep it interesting. And, for me, that's key, to have a page turner. And that's why I was really thrilled that I got a lot of nice quotes from best-selling authors who were really great that they read my book. And one of them, J.D. Barker, who was actually #1 on a bestseller list a couple of weeks ago. He wrote a quote that's on the top of my book, which says, "Relentless and gritty, Wendroff expertly weaves a narrative that begs just one more page." And that's exactly, what I wanted to have the reader feel like, that they got to stay up all night because they want to get to that next page because it's so thrilling.
Absolutely, absolutely, Michael. So, but how did you crack this code, marketing code? Means you have already made a success of it. Bloomsbury in the USA and UK, audio, ebook, and then also the foreign language rights. You have already Italian, Japanese, and Hungarian. I also got this cover also from this. Let me show, where is that cover? Yes, this cover, Hungarian cover. Means how did you crack this for writers, traditional publishing, that too you have cracked this code? How did you do this marketing? Did your experience as a global marketing consultant help? A lot of writers find it difficult to do it for themselves, Michael.
Well, it was really my literary agent that was able to get these deals. So, as I'd mentioned, publishers will not look at manuscripts that come from authors that are not represented. And, these days, the potential authors do have the option of self-publishing, which is a perfectly fine option. Some best-selling books come out of the self-publishing road, but if you're going to want to have your book translated into foreign languages and sold in other countries, like what goes around is, you really need an agent for that. So, that's the first step, and it's not an easy thing to get. You're going to be sending out what's called a query letter. So a letter that talks about what's special about you and your book, and you'll be sending that to a lot of agents. And if you get lucky enough, they'll take you on. But even an agent taking you on isn't any guarantee that a publisher will publish your book. Your chances are certainly better. But I remember, thinking back to Robert Ludlum of the Born Identity fame. His first book was sent by a literary agent to 14 different publishing firms, and they all rejected it. And then finally, a 15th firm, took a chance, published his first book, and it became a bestseller, as did his next dozen books. So, it happens in different ways, but to really take full advantage of all the different rights, it's best that you have a literary agent to do that.
Absolutely. And let me ask you this way: what was the hardest part of your debut author journey then?
Well, I'd say there's a couple of things. One is the editing process. So, the way I write is normally, I like to start out in the morning, and I will just scribble away to get the story out on my personal computer, on my PC, and I won't worry about anything. I won't worry about the spelling or the grammar or what the words are sounding like. And then the next morning I'll wake up and I will review what I had written the day before, and that's when I'll try and make it into real writing. So I'll try and add the analogies and the metaphors and almost try and get a poetic sense of writing to some degree. And then after I've done that, I will, type away to get the story moving for the next part. And that will be my process. So I will write away the story, edit it the next day, start writing that next day, the next sequence, just getting the story out. And I'll do that day after day, write, edit, until finally I can write my two favorite words, which are the end. But what I've learned, for a debut author with a traditional publishing house, what I learned is when you type the end, that's certainly not the end of the process, because there's a lot of editing that goes on beyond that. So, for example, there's an editor that first buys your book, acquires your book. And that editor, I would say, is more strategic, more conceptual. And so that editor will deal with things like, maybe you need a prologue, or maybe you need to move this action from the back of the book to the middle, stuff like that. And then you have after that's done, you rewrite your book based on that. And then there's a line editor, which is exactly what it sounds like, where they'll go through every single line, every sentence in your book to make sure it's as good as it can be. So you work with that editor. And then after that, there's a copy editor. And the copy editor's job is to make sure dates are right in your novel. If you're dealing with guns, that that you got that part right, or to make sure that you didn't say she has green eyes in chapter 2 and brown eyes in chapter 8. So you go through that round of editing with your copy editor. Then there's a proofreader who's got to make sure any little things didn't go by, and then you check it with the proofreader. And then I thought I was done, because every time all of these rounds, I've got to read my book again and deal with it. And then my hardcover publisher, Bloomsbury, comes to me and says, okay, we've set the typeface on your hardcover edition. Now you've got to go read that again to make sure nothing didn't fall out during that process. I can't tell you how many times I read my book. It's a good thing I like it. So that was a bit of a surprise that there are so many phases. And the other thing that was a little bit of a surprise, I'd heard stories about this, is I'm lucky that I do have a marketing background, because publishers these days do not do a lot but in the way of marketing, unless you're a Stephen King. They're not putting much support behind you. So it's up to the author to get out there. I would say that, these days being an author is 50% writing and 50% pushing your book, doing the marketing, doing the selling. So, would-be authors have to be prepared for that. And you have to be, getting out there on social media and establishing your connections. You have to do things like get on excellent podcasts. You have to try and push even like local support. For example, the local newspaper in our town did a very nice profile on me and my book. And a local magazine is putting me on the cover next month with talk about my background and my book. And, that's all from me pushing, looking for opportunities. I've done book signings and book fairs. And some of those things are interesting, where that, sometimes you're with other authors, and you might be at a place where there are tables with authors with their books, and the other authors will just be sitting back waiting for people to come to them. And, for me, it's like, I think because of my background, I'm out there in front of the table talking to everyone. And, luckily I always sell out of my books. So I think, most authors do tend to be introverted. So my background does give me that advantage in selling. But I think, any author, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and you'll get there. So, I'd say to would-be authors, just be prepared to really be out there and doing the marketing with your book.
Absolutely. So this book is done, but let's talk about the story. What is this whole story all about? What goes around? It almost sounds like what your mom did. How nice to see you again. That also goes around. But this is, I'm sure, it's a thriller. I'm just trying to understand both the things from that point of view.
It is a thriller, and it's about these mysterious shootings that are happening in a small town. And there are two detectives, Jack, who's a big brawny guy, kind of in the Jack Reacher mold, and a beautiful and brainy female detective. And they're paired up together, although they hate each other based on some experiences they had in the police academy together. But they need to find this killer before they kill each other. And their journey takes them into these secret worlds of these crazy groups, incels, boogaloo boys, these are real groups in the United States, unfortunately, and supremacists. And so they get caught up in that whole world. and there's a lot of twists and turns, which I love to write in, and then that amazing twist ending. So while it's a thriller that's a real page turner, it's also a story about love, life, and the unbreakable bonds that transcend time.
Absolutely, absolutely, Michael. So now this book is done. So it's just the beginning. Which career comes first now? The book writing part or the marketing part? Which is the first and which is the second one?
Good question. So I'm hoping that from now on I could continue to say that I'm an author, because I really loved writing, and it's certainly a flexible position, but I think I've just had it always within me to want to be a writer, from what my mother said the second I was born, till now. So I'm very happy. I'm very fulfilled writing, and I'm actually working on my second novel, and it is going to be a thriller as well, because you want to establish, just like in marketing, your brand. So my brand is thriller writing, and it will also include the two main characters from What Goes Around, because publishers like that. Publishers prefer a series, because you could continue each book and build on the other, and build on your audience. And I've been very lucky with the first one. It's already been through 3 hardcover printings. It's gotten terrific reviews. I'm so gratified at the consumer reviews I've gotten on Amazon and Goodreads, etc. And it's really happy, and I think my mother is happy wherever she is as well.
Absolutely. So one last thing I want to understand. Where do you see this? You have a lot of understanding of the industry, and also from a marketing person perspective. Where do you see this whole publishing industry going? Because see, earlier it was only traditional. Now you have got traditional, self-publishing, hybrid. How does it look like? Who is this industry going to be working best for? Will it be the time of self-publishers and traditional publishers will give way, or is it going to be much more different?
I think it's still going to be a mix. It is a little concerning that people have so many other alternatives besides book reading, and the book reading audience tends to be a little older, because you've got the entertainment space, you've got people playing video games, and certainly there's been the streaming section, and there's just so many alternatives for people's time. So that's a little concerning, but on the other hand, or maybe hand in hand with that, it's interesting to see that audiobooks have really taken off. I mean, I'm very happy that What Goes Around is available in audio as well, because in the last 5-10 years, that's been the major growth factor. So because people are busy, but they can multitask, and while they're doing something else in their home, they can listen to a book, or while they're commuting to work, they can listen to a book. And I think audiobooks are also going to be changing, in that audiobooks will become more like plays, where instead of having 1 or 2 narrators in the book, there'll be a half a dozen representing all the different characters in your book. And there's going to be a lot more sound to them, sound effects and music underneath them. I think there's a lot that's going to make them more like the competing entertainment sources that people have today. But in terms of traditional versus self-publishing, they're both going to be around. There's a certain reassurance readers will get from knowing that a book has been vetted by an agent and a publisher before they spend their hard-earned money on it. So traditional publishing will certainly always be around, but self-publishing today, if you've got something really good, it could rise to the top. Like Colleen Hoover, one of the best-selling authors, she started out in self-publishing. There's a lot out there, but so I think both aspects will be around, and I think this phenomenon of audiobooks will continue to grow as well.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn from you about the industry, and also so much to look forward to from Your number one book is out. The number two book is in the works. And I'm sure so many books now that you said you'll be focusing much more on your career or a career as an author. So for a lot of people who want to connect with you, learn more about you, learn about your book, and be part of this whole journey, what's the best way for them to connect with you, Michael?
Well, you can go to my website, michaelwendroff.com, and there you can, there's more information about me and my book and other ways to connect as well. And you can certainly buy it online at all of the different sites, including Amazon.com. So check it out there. I'd appreciate it. And I think you'll enjoy the show, the entertainment.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. It's been great.